The first signal came without warning, a sudden sharp message that echoed across the Earth. It was not a natural disaster, not a warning of an impending asteroid, but something far more dangerous. The Galactic Empire had arrived. A deep, commanding voice broke through the airwaves, its words cold and unmistakable. Earth, kneel before the Galactic Empire. Your survival depends on it. Submit now, and your people will be spared. Resist, and face annihilation. The message was clear. The Emperor of the Galaxy had spoken. The fate of Earth now lay in the balance. Earth's leaders, startled and confused, scrambled for a response. No one had ever seen anything like this. The Empire was known throughout the stars for its ruthless conquest of entire worlds, for its ability to crush any who dared resist. Yet here they were, making their demand to a tiny planet in a remote corner of the galaxy. At first, many believed it was some kind of mistake, a misunderstanding. Earth was just a small planet, far from the Empire's usual territories. Surely, they had no interest in such a place. But as the hours ticked by, the situation became impossible to ignore. Imperial ships, vast, imposing, and numerous, appeared in Earth's skies. They blocked out the sun, casting an ominous shadow over every major city. Governments around the world rushed to take action. Military forces readied their weapons, and diplomats worked furiously to open communication with the Empire, hoping for a peaceful resolution. But as the day wore on, the message from the Empire became clear. Resistance was pointless. The Emperor's demand was not open for negotiation. Earth was to submit, or face total destruction. The news spread like wildfire across the globe. Panic set in. People feared the worst. Could Earth really resist the might of the Empire? The stories of other planets, consumed by the Empire's power, flooded the media. Whole worlds had been reduced to nothing, scorched, burned, and forgotten. How could humanity stand against such a force? In the halls of government, the debate raged. Some argued for immediate submission, hoping that by complying, Earth could avoid total annihilation. Others, especially among the younger generation, refused to accept such a fate. They argued that to give in to the Empire's demands would be to surrender their freedom forever. At that moment, something shifted within humanity. The fear that had gripped their hearts began to give way to something stronger, resolve. They might be small, they might be outgunned, but humans were not easily broken. It wasn't just about surviving. It was about defending their way of life, their homes, and their freedom. Across the world, the call for defiance spread. People began to rise, not with weapons at first, but with their voices. They refused to be cowed. They refused to kneel. The leaders of Earth found themselves at a crossroads. Would they surrender, or would they fight? It was a decision that would determine the future of their planet, and the future of the galaxy. The resistance had begun. The war for Earth's freedom was about to start. The message from the Emperor had shaken the world, but it also sparked something in the hearts of the humans on Earth. Across the planet, defiance grew. No one could ignore the massive fleet looming above their skies, but humanity refused to cower. They might not have had the weapons of the Empire, but they had something just as powerful: their will to fight. As the days passed, the tension only grew. The Empire's ships, massive and intimidating, hovered in orbit, ready to carry out their threat. It felt as if the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen, waiting for someone to make the first move. The leaders of the nations debated behind closed doors, some calling for surrender, others pushing for resistance. But in the end, it was the people who decided. On every continent, the human spirit burned brightly. In the streets of New York, London, Tokyo, and every major city, people gathered, marching in defiance. They waved banners and held signs, shouting that they would not kneel. A movement had begun, and it couldn't be stopped. It wasn't just about a government's choice anymore. It was about every human who refused to live in fear. In the heart of these protests, a group of resistance leaders began to form. They weren't military generals or politicians. They were ordinary citizens, teachers, scientists, engineers, and doctors. They were the very people the Empire had underestimated. And it was these individuals who began to organize, to plan, and to dream of a way to fight back. At first, their efforts seemed like a fool's hope. The Empire was unbeatable, right? Their ships alone could wipe out entire cities with the press of a button. But the humans of Earth had something the Empire didn't: ingenuity. In secret laboratories and hidden bunkers, brilliant minds began working together, taking Earth's limited resources and turning them into something that could challenge the Empire's might. Old technology was repurposed, weapons refitted with alien technology scavenged from crashed ships and old battlefields. The engineers and scientists worked night and day, often with little more than scraps, but they didn't care. They had a fire inside them, a fire that couldn't be extinguished by threats or fear. Among the leaders of this growing movement was Sarah, a former aerospace engineer who had once designed civilian spacecraft for peaceful exploration. Now she was leading a team tasked with building something that could stop the Empire. She gathered the brightest minds she could find, and together they developed new technologies. A weapons system capable of piercing the shields of the Empire's ships, a communications network that the Empire couldn't hack into. But it wasn't just about weapons. The people of Earth knew they needed to act as one. And so, in every corner of the world, the people began to unite. The resistance wasn't just a group of rebels. It was a worldwide effort. Governments that had once been enemies now found themselves cooperating, sharing resources and intelligence. In a matter of weeks, Earth's population shifted from fear to determination. In the midst of it all, the Emperor's messages grew more insistent. His voice echoed across the airwaves, demanding that humanity submit. But each message only fueled the fire of resistance. The humans had made their decision. They would not bow. They would fight. The first step in that fight would be taken soon. Earth was ready to show the Empire that no matter how vast its power, it could not break the spirit of humankind. The Empire's arrival was unlike anything the people of Earth had ever imagined. The massive warships, shaped like dark, menacing clouds, filled the sky. They were so large that even from the ground, they seemed to block out the sun. The Empire's fleet was unlike any military force Earth had ever seen. Its ships sleek and deadly, with weapons capable of annihilating entire cities in the blink of an eye. The Emperor's voice echoed in every corner of Earth's communication networks, filling homes, offices, and public spaces with a chilling ultimatum: kneel or face the full wrath of the Galactic Empire. The demand was clear, and the fear it caused was palpable. Many humans felt small and insignificant in the face of such overwhelming power. It was easy to imagine that no one, no matter how strong their spirit, could withstand the might of the Empire. Governments scrambled to find a solution, but there was no clear answer. Most political leaders, out of fear or desperation, began discussing terms of surrender. The media spread reports of the devastation the Empire had wrought on other planets, and some feared that if Earth resisted, it would be wiped off the map without a second thought. Yet, in the midst of the fear, a strong, defiant force began to rise. There were still those who refused to bow, those who believed that humanity's survival was worth fighting for. The voices of resistance grew louder as the days passed. Small groups of soldiers, scientists, and citizens, inspired by the idea of protecting their home, began to organize. They refused to let the Empire decide their fate. Sarah, the engineer who had once worked on peaceful missions, found herself leading a group of scientists and engineers to develop countermeasures. Alongside other brilliant minds, she crafted technology capable of standing up to the Empire's invincible fleet. It wasn't much, not yet, but it was a start. They had limited resources, but they made every piece of technology count. They couldn't build a fleet of their own, not yet, but they could sabotage the Empire's systems and turn their own technology against them. Meanwhile, Earth's military leaders began organizing a defense strategy. drawing on the creativity and bravery of Earth's armed forces. They knew they had no chance of matching the Empire ship for ship. Instead, they would have to outsmart them, using the environment and guerrilla tactics to their advantage. Across the world, resistance cells began to form, each one operating in secret. They shared intelligence, gathered weapons, and prepared for the worst. Civilians, too, took part in the effort, using their skills to help in any way they could. Teachers, farmers, doctors, and builders all stood ready to do their part. Humanity's strength came from its unity, and it was that unity that began to show the Empire that they had underestimated the humans of Earth. Still, the Empire's reign was absolute. Their fleet grew closer, and their demands for surrender became more forceful. Yet the humans of Earth remained defiant. The world's leaders, now united, began to spread a message of hope and resistance. They vowed to show the Empire that Earth would never kneel. Not now, not ever. Though the odds were against them, the people of Earth were ready for the fight. And they would prove to the Empire that humanity was capable of far more than they had ever imagined. The pressure from the Galactic Empire continued to mount. The vast warships above Earth cast a dark shadow over the planet, reminding everyone of the Emperor's cruel demand. Kneel or die, his voice echoed through every channel. Yet the humans of Earth had begun to unite in a way no one had ever imagined. Their resistance had transformed from whispers in the dark to loud and clear defiance. The fight for survival was on, and the spark of rebellion burned bright. It wasn't just the governments anymore. Ordinary people from every corner of the world had picked up arms, tools, and ideas to fight back. Workers in factories, teachers in classrooms, even farmers in fields, they all became part of the effort. Earth's ingenuity and resourcefulness, traits that had often been underestimated by the Empire, were now fully unleashed. People who had never thought of themselves as fighters were now part of a global movement. Sarah, once a quiet engineer, now found herself at the heart of the resistance. The work she and her team had done in secret had begun to pay off. She'd helped develop a new form of energy shield that could briefly block the Empire's weapons. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. They called it the first line. It could stop an attack long enough for humans to escape or retaliate. It wasn't much, but it was a glimmer of hope. And as the resistance grew, so did the resolve of the people. In underground bunkers, human fighters began training with whatever weapons they could find. Soldiers taught civilians how to defend themselves, and engineers worked on repurposing alien technology scavenged from the debris of the Empire's failed attempts to invade. Every scrap of information was gathered and used to build something that could give humanity a fighting chance. News outlets, once filled with fear and despair, now broadcasted stories of the Resistance's growing successes. Stories of humans standing tall against the Empire spread like wildfire, inspiring others to join the cause. In cities across the world, protests had turned into calls for action. People took to the streets not only to demand freedom but to prepare for the fight to keep it. The military, once hesitant, now realized they had no choice but to fight. Earth's generals began coordinating their efforts with the resistance, sharing knowledge and resources. Together, they developed a strategy, guerrilla tactics that would disrupt the Empire's supply chains and communication networks. They couldn't win a battle head-on, but they could outsmart the Empire at every turn. Every attack they launched against the Empire weakened it bit by bit, and with every victory, humanity's resolve grew stronger. On every continent, resistance cells operated in secret. The largest ones were spread across cities, but the smallest ones were hidden in the forests, mountains, and caves. They worked in silence, waiting for the right moment to strike. But even in the silence, something else was building, something unstoppable: unity. The Galactic Empire had thought that their power would make Earth bow before them. They were wrong. It was not just the weapons or the strategy that the humans had. It was their spirit. The spark of rebellion had turned into a fire, and now the whole world was ready to fight for its freedom. There was no turning back. The days of waiting and preparing had come to an end. The Galactic Empire had underestimated humanity's ability to resist. But now, the time had come for Earth's fighters to make their mark, and they would make it in a way the Empire would never forget. It all started with a plan. A simple, yet brilliant strategy that would send a message to the Empire. Earth was not going to kneel. The Resistance had worked tirelessly, pooling together everything they had learned, every scrap of alien technology, and every resource they could muster. Their target was a major supply depot on the outskirts of the Empire's territory, a place where the Empire's forces were gathering their weapons and fuel to continue their attacks on Earth. If they could destroy this depot, they would strike at the heart of the Empire's war effort. Sarah, now a leader in the Resistance, stood with the team she had helped assemble. She had become the face of Earth's defiance, but even now, as she looked at the operation they were about to carry out, there was a nervous tension in her stomach. This was their first real test. If they failed, the Empire would crush them without mercy. But if they succeeded, it would be a victory that could change everything. They had spent weeks preparing for this moment, studying the Empire's security systems, analyzing their weaknesses. They knew the Empire was too confident in its power to expect a surprise attack. The Empire believed they had everything under control, but they didn't understand Earth's determination. Humanity's ingenuity, their ability to adapt quickly, was the one thing the Empire could never account for. The strike was set for nightfall. The team, a mix of soldiers, engineers, and ordinary citizens who had become extraordinary in the face of adversity, moved quietly under the cover of darkness. They wore camouflage suits, equipped with makeshift weapons and high-tech devices designed by Earth's best engineers. They traveled in small groups, using old military vehicles that had been adapted for this mission. As they approached the supply depot, the Empire's massive defenses loomed in the distance. The warships above Earth were still watching, unaware of what was coming. The Resistance had one shot at this, and everything had to go perfectly. The first explosions rocked the night. A series of carefully timed charges had been placed on the depot's outer walls. The blast was powerful, sending shockwaves through the facility and triggering alarms. But the team was already in motion. They ran into the chaos, planting additional charges, sabotaging key systems, and ensuring the fire would spread. The Empire's forces scrambled to respond, but they were too late. In the distance, the Empire's ships began to move, sensing the disturbance. They had no idea what was happening, but they were quick to react. More explosions followed as the Resistance hit their target with precision. Sarah and the others watched from a safe distance as the supply depot erupted in flames. The Empire's carefully guarded resources were now destroyed. It was a symbol of what Earth could do: fight back, strike at the Empire's power, and survive. The victory, while small, was immense. The news spread fast. Across the world, humans cheered. The Empire had been hurt, and it was the humans who had delivered the blow. This was the spark they needed. This was the beginning of the end for the Empire's control over the galaxy. The Empire would retaliate, of course, but the message was clear. Earth would never kneel. The success of the first strike sent shockwaves through the galaxy. Earth had delivered a blow to the Galactic Empire that they hadn't seen coming. For the first time, humanity had shown the Empire that they were not just a weak, helpless species to be crushed. They were capable of fighting back. In the days that followed, the impact of the attack spread far beyond Earth. News of the Resistance's success reached neighboring planets, some of which had long been under the Empire's rule. These planets, once too afraid to act, began to reconsider their loyalty. They had watched the Empire conquer worlds, destroy civilizations, and enforce their will with brutal force. But now, for the first time, the Empire had been challenged by a race they had deemed insignificant. The seeds of rebellion began to sprout in places across the galaxy. The Empire, of course, did not take kindly to being attacked. Their retaliation was swift and fierce. Warships descended on Earth, unleashing devastating bombardments on key cities, hoping to crush the resistance and force the humans into submission. But the Empire had underestimated the strength of humanity's resolve. The strikes only fueled the fire. The resistance had grown stronger, and they were not backing down. Humanity's fight was not without sacrifice. The Empire's bombardments caused devastation, leaving entire cities in ruins. But Earth's people, united by a common cause, fought with everything they had. Resistance groups in every corner of the globe began coordinating their efforts, sharing weapons, intelligence, and tactics. It became clear that the fight for Earth's freedom was no longer just a fight for survival. It was a global movement, one that would change the galaxy forever. One of the key factors in the Resistance's growing strength was the cooperation between Earth's military and the newly formed resistance groups. At first, there had been a divide. The military was hesitant, unsure if they should work with civilians who had no formal training. But as the attacks mounted and the resistance proved their skill, Earth's generals saw the value in joining forces. Military leaders shared their knowledge of strategy and tactics with the resistance, while the resistance brought fresh ideas and innovative technologies. The combination of military might and civilian ingenuity made them a force to be reckoned with. As Earth's defenses strengthened, more planets began to rebel against the Empire. Some of them had watched from the sidelines, unsure of the cost of resistance. But now they saw the humans of Earth, ordinary people standing up to the Empire with nothing but their courage and creativity. Slowly, the Empire's once unshakable grip on the galaxy began to loosen. Rebellions broke out across the stars, inspired by Earth's refusal to bow. Back on Earth, Sarah watched the news of these uprisings with a mix of pride and worry. She had been a part of the spark that had ignited this fire, but now she knew that the fight was only just beginning. The Empire would not give up easily. Their retaliation would be even harsher. Yet, as Sarah looked out over the crowded streets, filled with people rallying behind the cause, she knew one thing for sure: humanity was ready. They would not back down. The tide had shifted. The Empire's reign was no longer absolute, and Earth was ready to show the galaxy that the human spirit could not be broken. The resistance was no longer just Earth's fight. It had become the fight of the entire galaxy. The Galactic Empire, wounded by the attack on its supply depot, had no choice but to escalate its response. Their fleet, already vast and deadly, now included the Empire's elite forces, trained for one purpose: to crush resistance, no matter the cost. Earth's bold strike had drawn their ire, and they would make humanity pay for daring to defy them. Across the globe, humans braced for what they knew was coming. The Empire's ships darkened the skies once again, this time descending with full force. Entire cities were wiped off the map in a matter of hours. The Empire's message was clear: resist, and we will burn your world to the ground. They believed that Earth, just like every other planet they had conquered, would fall to their overwhelming might. But Earth's people were different. The Empire may have taken their cities, their homes, but they could not take their spirit. The human resistance, now a well-organized network, didn't just hide. They fought back, and with every blow they struck, the Empire's arrogance began to crack. Sarah watched from her command center as the first wave of Empire bombers approached the coast. Their ships loomed like shadows, blocking out the sun as they unleashed their deadly payloads. The resistance had anticipated this. They had set up defense systems, hoping to buy enough time for civilians to evacuate and for their countermeasures to be put into place. The first wave of bombs hit, but the Earth's new defenses were ready. The shield technology that had once seemed like a dream now held strong. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it worked. The bombs exploded against the shields with a mighty force, creating massive shockwaves. But Earth had managed to stop a large portion of the destruction. The resistance had done what they could to save their people. They had bought time. Time was what humanity needed most. As the battle raged on, the resistance launched their own attacks, sabotaging the Empire's ground forces and disrupting their communications. They couldn't fight the Empire's elite soldiers head-to-head, but they could strike quickly, forcing the Empire to spread their forces thin. Guerrilla tactics, once thought useless, were now proving to be their greatest weapon. In the midst of this chaos, something unexpected happened. The first wave of rebellions from other planets, those inspired by Earth's courage, began to reach out. Secretly, they sent resources, weapons, and fighters to help Earth. The Empire, caught off guard by this unexpected support, began to struggle. Their once iron grip on the galaxy was slipping. Despite the growing resistance, the Empire did not relent. Their tactics became more ruthless, their attacks more deadly. Earth's cities burned, and the cost of this war weighed heavily on everyone. Yet even as the death toll climbed, the fire of rebellion only grew stronger. The humans fought for their freedom, for their families, and for the belief that they had the right to decide their own fate. As Sarah watched the destruction unfold, she knew that they had reached a turning point. Earth had been pushed to the brink, but they had not broken. Every human who fought, every life lost, only added fuel to the fire of defiance. The Empire had made a terrible mistake. They had thought they could wipe out humanity, but instead they had united them in a way no one had ever seen before. The reckoning had come, and the Empire was about to learn that they had awakened something they could never control: the full power of the human spirit. The Empire's retaliation had been brutal. Entire cities lay in ruins, and the human cost of the war was beyond measure. But despite the chaos, the people of Earth stood firm. They had been beaten, but not broken. As the human resistance fought on, their small victories began to add up, showing the Empire that Earth was far from conquered. The Empire had relied on its overwhelming power, thinking that sheer strength would be enough to make humanity bow. But the humans of Earth had something the Empire didn't understand: a deep, unyielding desire to survive and protect their world. As the war raged on, Earth's defenses grew stronger, more organized. The resistance had developed new weapons, including advanced bombs designed to pierce the Empire's shields. They didn't have the numbers or the resources of the Empire, but they had something that mattered more: heart. Sarah, once an engineer working on peaceful projects, now led a team of military strategists and resistance fighters. The decision she had to make weighed on her. Earth had been pushed to the edge of destruction, but the time for hesitation was over. It was time to fight back in a way that would leave the Empire reeling. The plan was risky, but the stakes had never been higher. It was the final push, and humanity had nothing left to lose. The Resistance's plan was to strike back at the Empire's heart, its homeworlds, where their leadership, resources, and military might were centered. It wasn't just about defense anymore. It was about showing the Empire that they could no longer walk through the galaxy unchecked. The humans had been pushed too far, and now they would burn the Empire's worlds in retaliation. The first of the attacks came under the cover of night, when the Empire's warships were distracted by an earlier skirmish in Earth's orbit. The humans launched a series of devastating strikes on key Imperial planets using newly developed, highly advanced weapons. The weapons used a mix of alien technology and human ingenuity, designed to bypass the Empire's defenses and unleash catastrophic destruction. The Resistance hit the Empire's most critical colonies, planets that the Empire depended on for resources, food, and military supplies. When the first bomb hit, the shockwave was felt across the galaxy. The Empire's once untouchable homeworlds were no longer safe. Entire cities exploded in the blink of an eye. Planets, rich with resources, were reduced to smoldering heaps of rubble. The Empire's leadership, arrogant in their belief that they were invincible, were now facing the consequences of underestimating the human will to survive. The Empire's response was swift and merciless, but it was clear that something had changed. Earth's defiance had become a symbol of hope for the galaxy's oppressed. Other civilizations, who had long lived in fear of the Empire, began to rise up as well. One by one, planets that had been under the Empire's rule joined the fight. The galaxy, once controlled by the Empire's iron fist, was now in the midst of a rebellion that threatened to tear it apart. The humans, though still outnumbered and outgunned, had made their mark. They had proven that no empire, no matter how powerful, could crush the spirit of a people who were willing to fight for their freedom. As the resistance watched the destruction unfold, they knew one thing for certain: the Empire had made a terrible mistake. They had underestimated humanity, and now the Empire's world was burning. The galaxy trembled. Earth's resistance had taken the fight directly to the Empire, striking at its heart with relentless fury. Entire planets burned, and the Empire, once so sure of its power, now found itself at war with forces it had never anticipated. The rebellion had grown beyond Earth, igniting a fire of resistance on planets long held in fear. But the Empire was not defeated yet. The Emperor, furious at the losses his fleet had suffered, ordered a final, all-out attack on Earth. This would be the Empire's last attempt to crush humanity once and for all. It was a battle to decide the fate of the galaxy. Whoever won would shape the future of the stars. Earth had already paid a heavy price. Cities were in ruins, and millions of lives had been lost. But the spirit of humanity remained unbroken. The Resistance, now a full-fledged military force, was ready to face the Empire head-on. The strategy was clear: hold Earth at all costs. If they could push the Empire back, even for a moment, it would show the galaxy that humanity was not to be underestimated. Sarah stood in the command center, watching as the vast fleet of the Empire neared Earth's atmosphere. It was the largest force the humans had ever faced. Her heart raced, but she knew there was no turning back. The Resistance had one final weapon: a surprise attack that could potentially turn the tide of the war. But it had to work. They had no other options. The first wave of the Empire's ships entered Earth's atmosphere, unleashing their deadly payloads. The sky above Earth turned into a battlefield, with explosions lighting up the darkened sky. Earth's defenses fought back with all their might, the newly built shields holding for just long enough to allow fighters and resistance ships to engage the Empire's forces. For every ship the Empire destroyed, the humans fought back with tenacity, refusing to back down. On the ground, Earth's soldiers engaged in fierce battles against the Empire's elite troops. The Resistance fighters, now seasoned from years of combat, fought with incredible courage. They had seen their homes destroyed, their families lost, and now they were fighting not just for survival, but for their freedom. The Empire's soldiers, highly trained but unused to such fierce resistance, struggled to cope with the unexpected ferocity of the humans. In the midst of the battle, Sarah's voice echoed through the command center, giving orders to launch the final weapon. The plan was a risky one. Using the technology they had salvaged from their past strikes, they had managed to reverse-engineer a weapon capable of disabling the Empire's shields. It would take down the largest fleet the Empire had ever sent, but they had to act fast. The clock was ticking. With the weapon activated, a beam of energy shot into the sky, striking the Empire's lead warship. The ship's shields flickered, then collapsed entirely. It was the opening the humans needed. Fighters and resistance ships poured in, attacking the Empire's weakened fleet with everything they had. The once unbeatable Empire was crumbling, its ships falling one by one. The battle raged on for hours, but as the dust settled, it became clear that the humans had won. The Empire's forces, once so sure of their dominance, were broken. Earth had stood firm, and the galaxy had witnessed the full power of humanity's will. The Emperor, now facing certain defeat, was forced to retreat, his empire fractured beyond repair. Earth, battered but undefeated, had sent a message to the galaxy: the spirit of humanity could not be crushed. The final battle had been fought, and Earth had emerged victorious. But as Sarah watched the remnants of the Empire's fleet retreating into the void, she knew this was only the beginning. Earth had won, but the galaxy would never be the same again. The fight for freedom had only just begun.